And welcome back. It is the Brett Winterble Show here on Newsmax TV. Good to be spending this time with you, and I'm happy to welcome into the program. He's our very good friend, Father Bill Nicholas, Archdiocese of San Francisco. Our hands spreading across this beautiful state, the state of California. A very Merry Christmas to you, Father. Thanks for making time for us today. How are you?
Good to be back, Brett. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas. And listen, a lot to talk about. A lot was discussed over the Christmas table among folks who agree and disagree with a number of different things. First and foremost, though, is the impeachment issue. And there's a lot that people think they know, but they don't necessarily really know. And I wanted to bring you on to give a little context to this impeachment conversation. Go for it.
Well, of course, you and I have a lot to talk about when it comes to the politics of it. But in terms of the history and the constitutional aspects of this, we're basically seeing the Constitution play out. But the thing to remember in this impeachment process is that the Founding Fathers developed three branches of government, and each of those branches are meant to keep the other two in check. They didn't want all power vested in one branch. So you have the presidency, the Supreme Court, and the Congress. And each one is supposed to jealously guard its power and keep the other two in check. And the principle behind that is if the government is constantly in conflict with itself, then it's out of our lives and leaves us the liberty we need to prosper. But at the same time, you look at the legislature and you realize of all three branches, there's only one branch that actually is divided into two houses to keep itself in check. And that's the Congress. There's two branches, the House of Representatives and the Senate, and no law can pass in either house without also passing the other house. If a law is passed in the House of Representatives and rejected by the Senate, that's the end of it until they negotiate a law that both houses can agree on. But then even once the Congress passes a law, one person, the president, has the power to veto that law. So there's really very heavy checks and balances toward the Congress, which gives you an idea of where the Founding Fathers were more concerned about finding abuse of power. All the branches have their checks and balances, including the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's not the supreme branch. It's only one of three co-equal branches. And the other two branches can and have on occasion told the Supreme Court where to go if it didn't care for a ruling. And in some cases have overturned the Supreme Court in the Congress, or in one case, the President Andrew Jackson with the Indian Removal Act, an unfortunate episode in our history, told the Supreme Court to enforce its own law or force its own ruling, which it doesn't have any power to do. But in the case of the Congress, you have each house keeping the other in check, and then the president could veto the Congress. Now you see it played out here in the impeachment trial, and I think the leadership in the House of Representatives is realizing this, is that the Senate is there to keep the House in check. Because now the House has passed the articles of impeachment, they seem now reluctant to hand it over to the Senate because now, while they are holding the president accountable in their impeachment articles, the Senate is now going to hold the House of Representatives accountable in passing those articles of impeachment.
And one wonders if at some point, perhaps Majority Leader McConnell might go to the Supreme Court and ask them to compel Speaker Pelosi to transmit the articles of impeachment that she's currently sitting on. I mean, I imagine that would be.
That is a possibility. That's occurred to me as well. If she continues to sit on these articles of impeachment, it is a possibility that the next branch of government is brought in and the Supreme Court, on constitutional grounds, may compel the House of Representatives. You can't just pass articles of impeachment and sit on them. And at the same time, the Constitution says that the Senate has sole power to try impeachment, which means that the House of Representatives has no say in how the Senate will conduct itself in this process.
Right, because elections have consequences, and you have a majority leader who happens to be this majority leader, and he's going to set the table there in terms of this Senate trial that would take shape. And the House's job has been completed by handing up an indictment or the articles. Now it's time to let the process play out.
Right. And in the end, we see the genius of the Founding Fathers. Okay, the House exercised its power to impeach. And because the House is elected every 2 years, it needs to have its finger on the pulse of the population. And so, in an extreme example, where the House of Representatives has the luxury of allowing itself to be hysterical, the Senate is a much more deliberative body. And in fact, some say it is the most deliberative body in the world, perhaps in history. And because they're elected every 6 years and only 1/3 of the Senate is elected every 2 years, there's much more stability and much more reason to be impartial in reviewing not just impeachment, but any law that's passed by the House of Representatives. And in this particular case, is the question of the conviction and removal of the president. And you notice also that the trial in the Senate is presided over by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Normally, the president of the Senate is the vice president. But here the founding fathers said that it's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And that's all it really says. And they say, well, it's very ambiguous. But it isn't ambiguous when you put that direction, presided over by the Chief Justice, against the regular actions of and sessions of the Senate, which is presided over by the vice president. You can see there where there would be a conflict of interest, because the vice president would become president if the president is removed. So naturally, he would not be the one to preside over the Senate impeachment trial.
It's an incredible machine that these founders had the providence and the foresight to lay out and to build in terms of the process itself. In our last couple of minutes, I wonder, and it's a hypothetical, obviously, but I wonder, had there not been a 17th Amendment, which created the direct election of senators, if this would look incredibly differently as well, because you would have people who were there in the Senate representing the state rather than representing political parties that elected them. One does wonder how that would have shaken out, Father Bill.
And that's true, because the 17th Amendment shifted how the Senate is selected, but originally the people elected their representatives. But it was the state governments that appointed the senators. And initially, the people elect the state governments, but it was through that filter, the state government, that the Senate was chosen. But with the 17th Amendment, now the people elect the senators directly. But the reason why the Senate is a much more deliberative body is because where the House of Representatives represents the people, and we call it the people's house, the Senate represents the state establishments, and it represents the interests of each individual state, not necessarily the population.
It's incredible. And even given that shift, even given that built-in amendment that goes in, still the system functions. It still works itself out. And if Senator McConnell has the good sense to go to the Supreme Court, wink, wink, nod, nod, and compel those articles, I would say give it a run. See what happens. Father Bill Nicholas, it's always great to catch up with you, especially as we go through this the third day of Christmas now, right? We are on the day 3 of Christmas, and it is wonderful to catch up with you. And I look forward to visiting with you in a new year. How about that? All right.
Good to be here. Look forward to coming back.
Me as well. Father Bill Nicholas, Archdiocese of San Francisco, breaking stuff down, context, historical context. It's important to understand how this thing works, because remember, the founders didn't create this in the Twitterverse or in the Facebookosphere or any of those things. This was created for thinking people. And I think it was also the system was put in place because they knew that at some point you were just going to have hysterics. Your thoughts straight ahead, 877 Newsmax. I'm Brett Winterble. We'll get you an update and plenty more straight ahead right here on The Brett Winterble Show.